We'll call this meeting of the Craven County Board of Commissioners regular session for Tuesday, January 16th, 2024 to order. Madam Clerk, if you will, please call the roll.
Commissioner Howard.
Here.
Commissioner Hunt.
Here.
Commissioner Mark.
Here.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Vice Chairman Booker.
Here.
Chairman Jones.
Here. Ladies and gentlemen, if you will, please let's stand together as Mr. Grady, our county attorney, will lead us in prayer. Then I ask you to remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag.
Heavenly Father, from the endless bounty of your love for your creation, you provide all that we need. As your people, we confess our trust in you, believing that you care for our welfare. In God we trust, we proclaim on our currency and on this building, that the people of this county also put their trust in these elected commissioners. We trust that they will do your will and provide justice to ensure a quality of life that you provide. Protect these honorable commissioners, give them your wisdom so that their decisions may reflect your desire for your people. Give them a quiet assurance and guide them in the difficult times. May your will be reflected through them, and may your people be blessed by their leadership. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning to each and every one of you, and welcome here to the Board of Commissioners meeting. To those that may be viewing online, we also welcome you. We do ask for those of us that are in attendance, if we could make sure our cell phones are on silence, not to disrupt this meeting, we would appreciate it. Commissioners, you have before you your agenda packets. I'm going to ask, before we ask if there are any items to add or pull, that we would move item 1, Board of Education, Apple iPad lease resolution, if we would remove it down under 7, County Manager's Report, and make it 7B. As you're considering your agenda this morning, are there any other items you desire to pull or add this morning? Hear none. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion. Have a second?
Second.
And a second with the necessary change. Any discussion on the motion? Hear none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
No wonder it won't work.
Next item to consider is the consent agenda. We have before you the minutes of the January 2nd, 2024 meeting, tax releases and refunds, Recreation North Carolina Community Assistance Program budget amendment, and then the sheriff has a donation check for budget amendment. Are there any items you desire to pull?
Yes, sir. I would ask that we pull tax releases and refunds for a brief discussion.
Okay, we've had the pull item 2B. Are there any other consent agenda items you desire to pull? Hear none. Do I have a motion that we approve the consent agenda with the necessary pulling of B?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hear none. Madam Clerk, if you will, please call the roll.
Commissioner Howard.
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt.
Yes.
Commissioner Mark.
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Booker.
Yes.
Chairman Jones.
Yes. All right, 2B, Commissioner Hunt, we'll turn it over to you first. You got a few questions about it?
Yes, I would ask the county attorney to explain why we would release the tax liability for Carolina East.
Yes, ma'am. Glad to do so. That tax is related to some real property in a building that Carolina East acquired, I believe, at the end of 2022. Carolina East Health System is a hospital authority, which is essentially a unit of government, and as such, it's got a statutory exemption from the payment of any property taxes, real or personal. It's the equivalent of the city of New Bern or another local government. So it is proper to release it, and that exemption will remain in place for as long as Carolina East owns that property.
We lost $19,000.
Yes, sir.
That's my stomach growling.
All right, any other questions you have, Commissioner Hunt?
No other questions.
Okay. Any other commissioners have any comments, questions? All right, hear none. What's the desire of considering the tax releases and refunds. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to accept the tax releases and refunds. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, if you will, please call the roll.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt?
Yes.
Commissioner Mark?
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Booker?
Yes.
Chairman Jones?
Yes, thank you. All right, departmental matters. The first item we have is health, animal services request. We have with us this morning Mr. Scott Harrelson, our health director. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. We have a presentation Dr. Osler had put together, and she really wanted to be here to present to you, but she actually had some, it was scheduled to be in another venue. So Alyssa Margret, our supervisor at the animal shelter, and also our employee of the quarter, is here this morning to do the presentation. And I was wondering if you would entertain us doing the presentation before we did the vote, because I think it has a lot of pertinent information in it.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Alyssa?
Good morning.
Good morning. Like Scott said, my name is Alyssa Margret. I oversee the shelter operations over at Craven Pamlico Animal Services. Forgive me, this is my first time doing a professional type of presentation. I'm used to presenting at elementary school, so this is a bit different. But I am going to talk with you guys today about some of the updates that have happened since Dr. Osler and myself have started over at the shelter. The both of us started in June of 2023, so we've been there about 7 months now, and just kind of giving you guys an update on some things that we have noticed. So, some things in the past 6 months, new management, obviously myself and Dr. Osler, we have completely revamped our operations policies. So when Dr. Osler and myself had started, we pretty much had no operations manual or policy and procedure manual, so we went ahead and put one together. That way we have a more clear set of rules that we would like to follow for our animals. We have had a 2.2 times increase in adoption rates, which can be due to many things, but I think our presence in the community really speaks volumes to that. We have worked really hard to do a lot of community outreach with Craven County. We've had a 33% decrease in euthanasia, especially in our time and space related euthanasia. So we do at some points have to euthanize for time and space, but mainly behavioral or medical reasoning. But we've had a decrease in that. And then improved community relations, 1.6 times in rescue transfer rate. So essentially what that means is we work with different rescue groups that are generally no-kill shelters, and we will send our animals to them. And they have a little bit more time to devote to these animals than we do, or they have the funds necessary to provide them more medical care or behavioral resources or anything like that. So we've had an increase in sending animals out to rescue as well. So here you can see intake numbers and the, I guess, difference between July 1st to December 20th from 2022 to 2023. Really, we're just mainly focusing on the totals. So you can see owner surrender wise, we have had more owner surrenders this year. However, we have had a decrease in stray animals or seized animals, so that also speaks volumes for our animal protective services and our, New Bern Animal Control, Pamlico Animal Control, and those as well. For our outcomes, I'm very excited to talk about these results as well. So same dates, July 1st to December 20th. So adoption numbers, that is where you see that 2.2% increase. Transferring out to rescue, you can obviously see a very large increase in those numbers as well. And then euthanasia, or animals that have died in our care, that has dropped drastically in just those 6 months. Okay, so we have obviously a new full-time veterinarian who is also our director. So a couple things that she has kind of looked into changing, updating our vaccination protocols. This aligns a little bit better with HSUS, which is the Humane Society of the United States recommendations. And then with that, we've had a 27% decrease in illness-related euthanasias. a 50% decrease in death in the shelter. That can be related to the fact that we are vaccinating more frequently, or just being a little bit more diligent about the medical care that we're providing them. So total-wise, vaccination cost has been about $13,000. In-house medical care, we've had decreased external care costs. Because we have Dr. Osler in-house, we are no longer having to seek medical care outward, whether a different veterinary practice or anything. We have also been able to increase training for our staff to allow them to learn to assist with spay and neuter procedures, reading fecals, reading blood work, things like that, that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So increasing that. And then triage care for APS. We have had a few cases that the animals have had horrible injuries, whether it's from a dog altercation or hit by a car or anything else that could be happening to them, that have come into us, and we are able to very quickly triage, make them feel a little bit better to offset the cost of what it would then cost for either APS or ourselves to be able to treat those animals at a different location. For medical and testing costs, that's been about $8,500. And then in-house surgical procedures, we have eliminated our voucher system and then increased our adoption rates. And our surgical cost has been about $4,500. Okay, operations procedures. So employment of experienced operations supervisor. This is where I talk a little bit about myself. So I have worked in animal welfare since 2015. I have previously only worked at nonprofit shelters. So this is my first time with a municipal government shelter, which has been a very exciting and welcome change. But it has obviously shown its different difficulties as well. But it's been exciting to already see the changes that have been happening at the shelter. So in the time that I have been at different facilities, my most recent shelter before coming here was the largest no-kill shelter in Indiana. So I bring a good amount of experience that I've been lucky enough to learn from a lot of different people over the states. Full revision, like I said, of policies and procedures manual, so re-looking into all of our best practices of what we are providing the dogs and the cats. Utilization of existing Pet Point software to track vaccinations, testing results, and rabies certificates. This is a software that we have had at the shelter for a while, but we are now starting to actually utilize it a little bit better. So it will remind us, this animal is due for a vaccination, whether it's a booster or something else, or an animal is due for a medication every day, whereas previously we were just kind of writing it on paper to sticky notes to ourselves to make sure that we keep those things in mind. Improve sanitation and cleaning procedures. One thing that I have been lucky enough to learn from working at different shelters is the, proper usage of different kill ratios and what different products are actually good for as far as killing certain diseases. So we have done a lot of trial and error with different products cost-wise, and also seeing what really works in our shelter to kill the certain diseases that we see the most. And we have found what actually works for us versus what probably wouldn't work for us in terms of killing diseases and keeping it from spreading to other animals. And then a foster to adopt program. Foster to adopt program. So this is something that has, I think, played a very high direct role in increasing our adoption and euthanasia rates, because instead of that animal having to sit at the shelter for, say, 2 to 3 weeks while it waits for surgery, we are able to send it out with that adoptive home where they can take care of it, love it, and then bring it back for their spay and neuter appointment. So then it is opening that kennel right then and there, as opposed to waiting that time before we can get that surgery done. For instance, right now we are backed up about 3 weeks for our surgery spot, so it'd be quite a long time for them to have to wait with us, and it would take up a lot of space in our shelter. Hosting of found animals, this is something that we have really cracked down on. So every stray animal that comes into our facility, we try and post it on social media. Social media wise, we use Facebook as our main point of speaking with the public or connecting with the public. So posting of weekly intake numbers for community education. So with this, we have seen a 10% decrease in intake numbers and 50% less feral cats. I think what Dr. Osler and myself had noticed over the 6-month period is that there was just a lack of education when it came to the community. So they don't exactly know what is going on at the shelter, and they can't help us if they don't know what our problems are. So we have been working to be very transparent with people on, hey, this is what we're dealing with every week. These are the things that we really need help with. And we have luckily seen some very good feedback from that. So we hope to continue that. We also have a volunteer professional photographer. Her name is Hannah. She works, HLB Photography is her business. She is phenomenal, and she will come in and volunteer her time to take pictures of our animals that will then help post them on social media, and people love seeing those really fancy pictures as opposed to ours, behind a backdrop in an intake area. So 66% of engagement from followers, with the 98% of that reaching non-followers. So what that means is essentially with our posting on social media, we're getting a lot of engagement from the followers, but most of the people that are engaging in our posts, meaning liking, reposting, commenting, are non-followers, surprisingly. So that tells us that our reach is going somewhere, and it's broader than just Craven County, or people that wouldn't think to look for us anyway. And then posting of high-risk or special needs animals, whether that be through adoption or rescue commitment. I was just showing Scott a picture earlier of a dog that we got in over the weekend, a 115-pound Great Dane with really, really horrible cherry eye, which is essentially not allowing her to see out of either of her eyes, and so she had to be surrendered to us. And luckily, we have a great rescue group that we work with, and we're able to take a picture, send it to them, talk to them about some details, and she will actually be leaving to Virginia tomorrow. So that's a situation where, with Dr. Osler, if she had been here, it would have been surgical repairs for both of her eyes, and potentially not even making it to the point that she could be available for adoption, because she does have some behavior issues as well, that we just don't have a lot of resources to continue working on with her. So saving her life by going to rescue. So rescue and APS cooperation. So we have seen a 63% increase in transferring to rescue outcomes. We work very heavily with a lot of different rescues. I just kind of looked into the numbers, and since July, we have had 11 new rescue groups that have not worked with us previously that are now working with us. But we have been working very heavily with a lot of our local rescue groups as well. So Colonial Capital pulls from us a good amount. Misplaced Mutts, To the Rescue, those are just a few that are really working with us to help save some of the animals. We actually just sent out 11 puppies on a flight on Saturday, so we will send them anywhere if we can get someone to take them. Assistance with court cases, so we are also able to do medical or post-mortem examinations in the cases that an animal comes into us and medically it is determined that it's best for that animal to have to be euthanized. We can do post-mortem autopsies and then give the officers all of the information of what we are finding. That way they can hopefully charge the people and get some justice for the animals that we're seeing in our care. Petitioning of defendant for financial support of housed animals. This is something that is still kind of new. We actually just met with Major McFadden last week about it to kind of figure things out a little bit more of what that would look like with us and APS. That way these animals aren't staying in our care for quite as long, because previously there are dogs, when Osler and myself had started, that had been living at the shelter for about 2 years. We just finally sent our last dog out that had been from a group that had been living with us about 1.5 years, and the last 2 of them finally got pulled by Colonial Capital after their court case was released. So hopefully we're on to better things with our working together and can get these animals out a little bit quicker. And then temporary EMS assistance for affected animals. So EMS assistance would be emergency medical service. So if someone, say, has to go to the hospital or has another situation to where that they can no longer take care of their animal in an emergent situation, animal control can take them to our facility and we will house them. But we have come to an agreement again to help them move through the process smoothly, but we are still able to get some compensation if they do have to stay with us for longer. So we provide service free of care for 72 hours, and then after that it is $15 a day for just that boarding fee up to 2 weeks. And then after that 2-week mark is when we really have to figure out with the people, okay, are you going to be getting the animal back? Do we need to send it to rescue? Can you have a family member come and pick it up? Or does the animal ultimately need to be surrendered over to us? So helps us, like I said, move them through a little bit quicker, so we are shortening their length of stay. TMVR, 40 cats per month, that is an average.
What is T?
TMVR is trap, neuter, vaccinate,
Okay.
and release. So
Okay.
that is going to be the colony cats, the feral cats,
Right.
the cats that have the ear tips. So there are a few groups I'm sure you guys are familiar with: Derby cats, Helping Cats of Newbern. Island Cats is a newer one that has kind of off-split from Misplaced Mutts. So all of them will bring animals to us on Wednesdays, and Dr. Osler will then fix them, tip them, and then we will send them back out to those rescue groups. That way these animals aren't having to come to us like they have previously and unfortunately just be euthanized. So TMVR is really saving the lives of those animals and help not repopulate in the future. And then they're also getting vaccinated so that we don't have cats everywhere that are unfortunately unvaccinated. Yeah. Community and media engagements. So these are just a list of different types of media channels that we have worked with and continue to work with. Sun Journal, WNCT. So they will do animal highlights, whether it is weekly or semi-monthly, whatever it looks like for them. They'll come in and do a special video about an animal to get them a little bit more spotlight than they would have. And then fundraising wise, these are two things that are new to us as of this year. So in August of 2023, we did an open house. That was mainly to try and bring the community in and try and get them to really meet us and talk with the staff. But it did end up raising some good money. So we did raise $2,552 from that. All of that has gone into our Friends of account, which will then go to anything extra, like providing the heartworm care for the animals, or anything else that we wouldn't be able to provide for them otherwise, just because of budgeting, or it's not a quote-unquote necessity for them, but it's going to make them more adoptable or improve their quality of care while they're with us. And then Jordan's Way was a virtual fundraising event that we had him come in. He did a 3-hour live event where we played all of these really fun games and just had some good exposure for the animals and for the staff and raised some money from that. Coastal Women's Shelter, we did an adoption event with them in October where we were at the park and we had some animals out there, some vendors, we did a trunk or treat. So it was a really fun and exciting event. We had 2 animals adopted from that, and both of those dogs were actually dogs that had been there for a little bit longer. So it was good exposure for them. And then we actually from that, I want to say it was around $1,500 is what we got donated from them as well as a result of money that they had fundraised for us. Shelter Pet Day proclamation, I'm sure you guys are aware of that one as well. So that was a new thing as of this year, and through that weekend, so that would have been Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, so November 30th, December 1st, and December 2nd, we waived adoption fees, but we were using the funds that we had raised with the Jordan's Way event, and all of those paid for those adoption fees for that weekend. And with that, we had 33 animals adopted within that 3-day period, so it helped people take home some animals where maybe they wouldn't have been able to otherwise, or it brought them in for seeing animals even if they could afford it. Just helped, maybe they could put that money elsewhere for the animal. And then Newbern Live is another media group that we have worked with to get some better focus on the animals. So our vision for 2024, we want to further develop the policies and procedures to continue increasing adoption and decreasing euthanasia. Animal welfare is ever changing. There are new policies and best practices coming out every single month, so we will continue looking into those and following up with those. Increasing community engagement. Obviously, our social media presence is something that has worked well for us, so we plan to continue with that. And then working closely with rescue groups to place animals. We'll continue to work with the groups that we already have, as well as building new relationships. And then monitoring NCVMB closely for updates on facilities license to provide low-cost TMVR and spay-neuter programs to the community. NCVMB is North Carolina Veterinary Medical Board. So essentially, the reason why we are not able to provide any medical care aside from a rabies vaccine to the public right now is by North Carolina law. The only way we are allowed to do that is with a facilities license. Dr. Osler honestly probably knows a little bit more about the exact specifics of all of that, but they are looking into getting a facilities license for the year of 2024. That way we will be able to provide low-cost spay and neuter and give people microchips and other vaccinations aside from rabies vaccines so we can truly help our community a little bit more than what we are legally able to do right now. So now I ask about money. So budget amendment needs. So vaccinations of the animals as recommended by the HSUS. With all of the changes that we have put into place, it ended up being a little bit more costly than what we had previously thought. So we are following those guidelines, and for some animals that means that they are getting 4 vaccines in the time that they're with us, or at least 2 vaccines in the time that they're with us, whereas previously they were probably only getting 1 while they were with us. I know that we are now giving Bordetella vaccines on a very regular basis, which wasn't done previously. So there are just some best practices that we're trying to keep these animals healthy. So $13,000 for that. And then in-house treatment of animals, this goes more into the medical prescriptions or medication side of things. So this would be all of the antibiotic medications, or something that we are doing more regularly now is anti-anxiety medications. A lot of these animals are very stressed out when they come into the shelter because it's a new environment and it's scary. There's a lot going on. So it has been proven that anti-anxiety medications such as trazodone or fluoxetine actually help improve those animals' quality of life so that they can be a little bit better behaved while they're with us and be a little bit calmer, which will obviously improve their adoptability, yes. And then in-house surgical procedures, this is all of the surgical equipment that it costs for us to keep up with, whether that's anesthesia, drugs, or anything else. That's all I got. What questions do you guys have?
Questions,
if
Commissioner
anything?
Howard, you got something?
I just have a comment. I'm not one to like willy-nilly spend extra money for things, but what you guys have done with your resources has been impressive. And
Thank
then
you.
thinking that we'd taken a situation that was kind of negative and turned it into a positive. So I'll commend Jack and Scott both for taking the situation and turning it something. I've, just a lot of positive comments. You would go out and the comments weren't always positive. They were kind of mixed. Now I've not heard anything negative recently.
Yay.
You can do a lot of... taking a headache off of our plates,
Thank you.
Yep.
We very much believe that the community, while in some situations they are the issue, they're also the solution. They're the only way that these animals are going to get out of here. We can't take all of them home or save all of them. So community helps greatly. But
Really impressed with the CAP program going out there, and because we've just seen that population get higher and higher, these feral cats, and finally someone's doing something to kind of curb that.
yeah, trying to. But all of the rescue groups that are local really are the ones that are doing all the groundwork. We're just fixing them and doing our best with that. But
That's huge.
those rescue groups are awesome.
All right, other questions down here?
A couple. First,
We'll
on
get you
the
next.
adopt, on the foster to adopt.
Yes.
We're bringing them back to be fixed 3 weeks. Are you having any issues with compliance on that?
Honestly, we haven't. We have had a few situations where people have forgotten. And so in that case, we will just reschedule their surgery for a week later, whatever that might look like, and then they come back. So we haven't had any issues as far as the spay and neuter. I think at the end of the day, we are very open with people in saying you don't pay the adoption fee, and this animal is technically not your animal until it is altered and you finalize adoption paperwork. So we tell people, especially if we get any funny feelings or worry that they might not bring this animal back or have ill intentions of taking it home unaltered, then it doesn't go. We also will tell them, look, animal control can come out to your house and do a welfare check if they feel like they need to, or to assist you in bringing the animal back if that's what we need to do as well. But if we feel any kind of way about setting them out unaltered, then we'll keep them at the shelter.
With it, and the other, has the license for the spaying, neutering public facility, have y'all applied for that? Or
Not
is
as
this
of
in
yet,
the-
I don't believe. I don't know the exact logistics of it. I'm so sorry. Dr. Osler would definitely know more, so I can have her.
Scott, you want to
Scott.
comment?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. On that end, Dr. Osler is maintaining communication with the state, and when it's available to us, she would like to do that.
Okay, I don't understand available to us.
Well, when anybody can apply, I think basically the ball is in the state's court right now to be able to pass or change the law that it is available for us to do those types of services for the community. Right now, I do not believe we're there yet.
Okay, so even if we wanted to, we couldn't right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct.
Okay, but my other comment is just, wow, this is wonderful. I am so glad we hired Dr. Osler and all the professional staff that she has brought in. I've been here 15 years. This is wonderful, so thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
Yeah. If a pet owner drops an animal off, do they have to give an explanation of why?
They do. So I will say in different situations, there are times that people are untruthful, whether it is a pride situation. Sometimes they're honestly embarrassed at having to surrender their animal, but we try and get as much information from them as we can. We are also very honest with people when they are surrendering those animals that there is a chance of euthanasia, especially if they're surrendering it for a behavior concern. I would say 95% of the time that does not deter people from surrendering to us.
Okay. Did you have anything, Vice Chair?
Two things. Number one, your first time speaking to the public, did you say?
For a professional instance, yes.
Did a good job. You did very well.
Thank you.
Scott, and my second comment was Scott was wise to put you out front here rather than him coming and asking us for more money.
Well, thank you.
Commissioner Hunt?
As a matter of fact, I do have a couple things I'd like to mention. First of all, congratulations on Employee of the Quarter.
Oh, thank you.
You and the rest of the crew have overcome many challenges in a very short period of time, but rather than review everything that you just shared with us, there was just a couple things I wanted to mention. 11 new rescue groups. While I pay very close attention to what's changing in your organization, I didn't even know that we had 11 new rescue groups that Craven County is working with. I think that's phenomenal. Thank you for that. And I was also curious, I've also noticed an improvement in our cat populations and the concerns I've heard. What type of TNR was being done, say, early of 2022? Do you know?
I don't know exactly. I don't know if you're... Yeah, I think that there was mainly the groups that we are still working with right now would try and get them into vets themselves, and then they would, pay out of cost for things like that. But there was nothing that was set up on a regular basis. So as we're able to do every Wednesdays right now, and I know that it said that the average was about 40 a month, but Dr. Osler just last week did 19 in that one day. So I think that it's working on being more than 40 cats a month, but previously I don't think that there was any kind of set.
It just wasn't happening.
Yes, it just wasn't really happening that much.
Okay. And the final thought, well, be quiet, Bordetella vaccinations. I always think Bordetella vaccinations, I don't know that everyone understands how critical Bordetella is when they live in a close environment like that, and how quickly those dogs can get sick and they spread it like that. I would compare it to TB in humans.
Yeah, it is definitely intense, and we see it in cats as well, which is why we try and vaccinate our cats directly on intake. In the terms of a shelter world, parvovirus is going to be your main disease that you think of that will be most fatal to a dog. However, Bordetella is preventing kennel cough and upper respiratory disease or infection. So upper respiratory infection, just like the common cold, is going to spread very quickly, and some dogs are going to react differently to whatever those symptoms may be. So it can be very bad when spread throughout the shelter. But yeah, Bordetella vaccinating is very important.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Martin, did you have anything?
Yeah, I think that in the past 6 months, we have come, I won't say 100%, but I'll say 98% in really operating a good shelter. And for those people who used to come here and complain, who didn't know a thing about a shelter, we've got professional people working there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. County Manager, do you have anything?
Yes, sir. I would refer the board to your agenda. There's a budget amendment there. I wanted to give you a couple little details, and I don't know if Scott was going to do this, so I hope I'm not stealing his thunder. But when you have that up, there's the $27,500 in adoption fees. And this is very similar to other health department programs where increased revenue throughout the budget year is being used as a revenue source versus county tax dollars from fund balance, okay? So this is being supported by the increased revenues and rescues and things that they said. So if you look at that revenue, 27.5, then on the flip side, as Alyssa told, 26,000 is for medical supplies and equipment and things in the surgical suite, but there's also a $1,500 maintenance repair, and that's for the hose bib system that's used to clean the kennel space. So there was a repair that's necessary there. We went ahead and included that in. It's not in your presentation, but when we noted the BA, we want to make sure we made you aware of that expense as well. But I'd say I agree with everything that was said, and I'm really proud of Alyssa and Dr. Osler and Scott. They're really running a great program, and I'm proud of it. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, Scott?
Mr. Vite has covered it, all of the
Okay.
costs, and Alyssa, a great presentation, so glad for her to be here this morning. I will end it there.
Okay.
27.5 budget amendment request.
All right, Commissioners, you heard the request.
Move to approve.
I have
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the budget amendment amount of $27,500. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, if you will, please call the roll.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt?
Yes.
Commissioner Mark?
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Booker?
Yes.
Chairman Jones?
Yes. Scott, Alyssa, thank you both for being here. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you for your support. Much appreciated.
Have a good day. All right. Next item, Commissioners, is planning. We have with us Mr. Chad Strong, our Planning Director of Craven County Land Use Plan Update.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
In November, staff published a request for proposals in search of a consultant to update the Craven County Land Use Plan, with the proposals being due November the 30th. We received 2 proposals, one from InFocus and one from Insight Planning and Development. After review and rating by our review team, staff requests that the Board of Commissioners award the contract to Insight. Both firms are very capable of the task, but Insight presented a fee that was within our allocated budget of $150,000. Insight's proposed fee was $147,350, whereas InFocus was $168,000. So at this time, staff requests the Board of Commissioners award this contract to Insight Planning and Development in the amount of $147,350.
All right, Commissioners, before we entertain a motion, you got any questions concerning the land use plan update? All right, here no questions. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion.
I have a motion and a second from Commissioner Smith to award the contract Insight Planning and Development, amount of $147,350. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, if you will, please call the roll on this. Thank you.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt?
Yes.
Commissioner Mark?
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Booker?
Yes.
Chairman Jones?
Yes. Thank you.
So the next step, staff's going to be getting with the consultant. We would like to do a combined Commissioners Planning Board meeting so we can set forth the task and issues at hand that you'd like to see covered in our update of our land use plan. So hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months.
Okay, great, thank you. Have a good day, sir. Next item, Commissioners, is appointments. You have before you pending. We have a number of them there. A lot of them here, though, we're waiting. They are appointments that have to have certain individuals because of their profession. We're still waiting on many of them to be given to the clerk, but do you have any nominations today? All right, here no pending. We will now go to current. The first one, Emergency Medical Advisory. You have a seat that's been vacated. You have an applicant of Tony Heckman who seeks appointment to fill this seat. What's the desire of the board?
Recommend we appoint Mr. Heckman.
All right, we have a nomination of Mr. Heckman. Do we have additional nominations? Here none, we will set Mr. Heckman by acclamation. Next will be the Community Child Protection Team. You have Ms. Jenny Cook, Department of Social Services. What's the desire of the board?
I make a recommendation for Jenny.
We have Mr. Cook. Are there additional nominations? Here none, we will set by acclamation. Next is the Cove City Craven County Library Board. You have the applicant of Nanette Walston Moore. Mr. Hawkins serves on several other boards here for Craven County, and so he is not eligible to be reappointed to this. I would ask that the board appoint Nanette Walston Moore. I make that nomination. Are there additional nominations? Hearing none, we will set by acclamation. Next, the Vance-Spur Craven County Public Library, we have Denise Smith, who currently serves, who seeks appointment. What's the desire of the board?
I would recommend her
Okay,
reappointment.
we have the nomination of Ms. Smith. Are there additional nominations? Hear none, we'll set by acclamation. Next would be a seat that's been vacated. You have an applicant of Catherine Whitford, who seeks appointment. What's the desire of the board?
I would reappoint.
Okay, we have the nomination of Ms. Whitford. Are there additional nominations? Hearing none, we will set by acclamation. That's all the current that we have before us. Then you see the upcoming terms expiring. Are there any additional nominations to be considered today? Hearing none, we will next move to County Attorney's Report. Mr. Ari Grady. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. The item before you today involves the proposed acquisition by the county of real estate on Highway 17 North in the town of Riverbend. The proposed use is for a new library to serve the residents of Craven County. As we've done in the past, we made the offer through essentially a shell company to give the county a little bit of anonymity during the negotiation process, because when the county's identified, the price usually goes up considerably. So we got the parcel under contract. The purchase price is $360,000. We've got a due diligence deadline of March 2nd. That's essentially to update the title work and make sure that we've got sewer, water availability, all that kind of stuff. But staff's already confirmed all of that, and then we would close on or about March 7th. So sometime in March, I hope to be able to report that the deal has been finalized. For your approval this morning, we've got the contract assignment, the budget amendment, and also you would authorize the staff to take the necessary steps to close under the contract. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, questions for Mr. Grady?
It's been a while since we talked about this. Can you enlighten us as to where this parcel is and relative to the Riverbend light?
Yes, sir. I will do so if you are going north on 17 from Jones County. You go through the Riverbend light, and then there's a series of commercial buildings, and there's also a convenience store, and then there's a relatively new equipment rental location.
Sunburst or whatever.
Something like that, yes, sir. This is the vacant lot just north of that new location before the entrance to Norbury Estates.
Thank you.
With it, Mr. Chair, since this is in my district and I serve on the library board, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this contract.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second, and the board action is to consider approving the contract. the contract assignment, budget amendment, authorizing staff to take the necessary steps to complete the transaction and close on the property. Any further discussion on the motion? I am going to ask after we have the roll call vote, I would like the county manager just to talk a little bit about, folks here a new library. We don't have any funding for a new library, but just go through the steps of what our mindset is. But we will allow you to do that after we take the vote. Any additional discussion on the motion? Hear none, Madam Clerk, if you will, please call the roll.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt?
Yes.
Commissioner Mark?
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Bucher?
Yes.
Chairman Jones?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. All right, next is the county manager's report. Mr. Vite.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I have quite a bit of material. I'm gonna try to stay here so I can keep everything. But would you like me to address that
you would.
issue first? So now that you've acquired the property, it's really up to this board and your determination for when you want to move forward. But what we saw over the last year is land was becoming very scarce in that corridor. And this was really, I think after talking with Commissioner Mitchell and riding with her, if it wasn't this site, I don't believe there would be another one that would be as convenient for citizens who want to use it. Ultimately, what my suggestion would be is to develop the project as you see the timing, get it in the capital improvement plan, which then, of course, designates funding for that. Once you have that step done, we begin design and move forward with that. But it's completely at the pace that the board desires at that point. But if you didn't do this step, you were never going to do the other steps, okay? Or at least you weren't going to do it this area.
Question for the county manager.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Are we seeking any state or other funds as part of this process? Or
I think we'd have to get a little further down the road with the conceptual drawing before that's possible, but I would say absolutely. I've been bullish on libraries with legislative funding until this past session, where I saw a lot of library projects. And remember, a library in today's term isn't a library, Chad, from our generation. It's more of a community center. It has a vibe of public meeting space, which there's a real lack of in that community, but still maintains the library components with books, magazines, computers. But it's more modern, so I think that sells a lot better than a traditional library with books. And I know there are library with books people, and I think that that's still an important aspect. I'm not downing it.
But I think the general public expects more than that now.
Any additional questions?
Yeah, that particular land is out of the water problem.
That particular land is got a great elevation. That was one of the things that drew us to it. There's been a tremendous amount of work on the lot already done because of the development of Sunbelt. And Mr. Hodges probably could speak to some of it, but I mean, really, there's not a more perfect site for what we're trying to do than that place.
Okay. Any additional questions? Thank you for the explanation.
And I'd also like to give you an update on the other project, which was the sister project to this, which was land in Township 5 for a park. We have identified a parcel. We are reaching out to the owners. We're certainly a little bit behind because there's some elements to the property that make it more challenging with an ownership component, but we're still working very hard, and Mr. Hodges and Mr. Wilkes are talking about it every week. We hope this spring to bring something forward to you, and of course, I continue to work with Commissioner Hunt on that. But we have the same scenario that I mentioned earlier where we've ridden several times. This piece of property is the most desirable piece. If we have to backpedal, it's certainly a challenge. So we're hopeful that we can get this through to you this spring, but just want to update you that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? All right, so I have several items for you this morning, but most important, because we have now 4 commissioners at a minimum that will attend the Tuesday, January 30th, 2024 meeting about opioid settlement dollars, we will need to have an official special meeting of the board. Mr. Chairman, I have the notice here. We'll post that downstairs, and of course, Nan will do all the public information things, but just making the public aware. And that meeting starts at 5 p.m., tentatively to 6, depends on questions and comments, but we do anticipate that being a regular meeting of the board. Moving forward, last week was a very busy week, but there were 3 things that stood out to me I wanted to share with you. Commissioner Smith and I attended the Dick Center meeting. It was her first meeting as the new member of that board. There are some challenges Commissioner Smith and I talked about on the ride down and the ride back that will probably develop and work into our budget session, but ultimately and I shared this with the group in Jacksonville, we are not receiving the amount of bed space that's consummate with the amount of money that we're paying. And some of the New Hanover issues, so New Hanover County had a large proportion of the beds because they had a facility closed several years ago. They've now got new facilities open. That's dropped off, but our proportionate share hasn't increased. And we talked about with the leadership there, Commissioner Smith and I did, and Commissioner Mark and I have over the years, about ways we can influence more folks to use that facility from Craven County, and it's just not happening. We've tried everything. So is there another option that works better for our citizens? We've heard about some new facilities that are coming online. I think we need to explore those, but ultimately we're spending $300,000 or roughly 20% of the total expense of the facility for 8% of the bed space. So those numbers don't add up anymore. So in the past, we've known those numbers have been existent. They've decreased. We were usually around 15% in years past. 8% is really low in my mind. Commissioner Mark, you may have an opinion from your time on the board, but
No, I would agree with you. The percentage has gone down. And the other problem is, will Dix be available next year?
well, that's right. And so there's a lot of unanswered questions. Commissioner Smith and I have another meeting to follow up on budget, I believe in a couple of weeks, so we'll report back to the board. But I just want to put that on your radar as we go into budget. There may be a decision you have to make then that may be different than what we did now.
And where does this leave the hospital as far as money? I mean, at this point, the president doesn't see the need for them to spend $100,000 towards this, which I think is definitely wrong, because these people are going into the hospital, and in most cases, as long as they're in there by a certain time, we pick them up and take them down to Dix Crisis Center. So we're saving them 2 or 3 days in a hospital.
Right. So, the hospital's probably perspective would dovetail ours. Their financial commitment has to make sense for the amount of usage they're getting.
Right.
The one thing, if there was a bright spot in the last report, which you'll get either in this memo or the next one, was that there were more hospital diversions than I had noted in the past. I believe there were 3 or 4. It's usually around 1 or 2. So I like to see that. I, of course, like to see jail diversions. There hasn't been as many of those lately. Obviously, Major McFadden knows the complications with that. And then generally what I'm seeing, the predominant source of bed space is people who are just showing up at the door. They're not calling, they're not coming through any other means, they're just showing up for help. And of course for us, it's a lot easier to show up if you live in Jacksonville than if you live in Cove City, or you live in Vanceboro, or you live in Harlow. Right?
If you will, hold that thought. Commissioner Mitchell, you got a comment?
Well, I have a question, and I want to make sure that we clarify this for any citizens who may be watching. If we decide to back off somewhat from the Dix facility, I want to clarify to our citizens that there would be other alternatives for detox beds that would be available to the citizens of Craven County if we did so.
Correct. So one of the flaws in the methodology of the Dix Center is they can't refuse a patient from Craven County.
Right.
Whether or not you're a $300,000 contribution or you're a 0 contribution. And that's been the issue with New Hanover County and Brunswick County and Pitt County and Lenoir County, who sent folks to this facility. They've had the same enjoyment of benefit, but at no cost. So I asked that question last week. I said, so if we don't pay the $300,000, do you still have to take our people? And the answer is yes. But their moment back, and this is a good point, is without the $300,000, we don't know if there'll be a Dix Center at all. So that's a question that has to be answered, right? But to your point, absolutely. Detox is a vital part of the person's journey as they're going through a recovery. If we don't have detox, we have nothing. So we have to have an alternative, if it's not Dix, to solve that issue.
So there will be
We will find one.
Okay.
We'll find one or we won't leave. It'll
Okay.
be one of the two.
And also hope certainly helps, because the highest percentage of people going down there is alcohol.
That's correct. So most people assume it's opioids that's, what's driving, but alcohol is the number one reason that folks show up at the Dix Center. But there's a lot of co-occurring opioid, alcohol, mental health, stimulant. You mix all those things together. So, but alcohol continuously is on the checklist.
Vice- Okay.
There's one thing there, that originally was set up for a 7-day stay, and it's turned into a 3-day stay.
About 3.5.
And I guess that's because most of it is from alcohol and it's not from the dope that is flying around out there.
And it's person-driven, Commissioner Mark. So some folks may be able to do it in 3 days. Some may need to stay 7. It really depends on the
Yeah.
severity of the individual.
Vice Chair Booker.
Two things. When we went to Wilmington, they also said alcohol was their number one issue when people showed up. However, they also went on to say that it's rare that somebody who is addicted to any of the other drugs is also an alcohol user. So they said, we don't get just somebody that's just alcohol or just opioids. It's all they use everything and whatever they can get their hands on. So that was something that I thought was interesting, particularly when they said alcohol was their biggest number of people showing up. The second thing is, Jack, I'm not sure I understand why our number went from, say, 15% to 8%. Was it that we didn't have people to go there, or we didn't have beds available to us?
It's some of both. It just depends on the situation. So
I guess my point is, if they're saying, hey, we don't have a bed for you,
right,
and we're paying the money,
right,
something's wrong here. But if they say, we have a bed available, but you've only used 8% of the facility,
right,
then that falls back on us as saying, why aren't we getting people there? That makes sense?
It does. There is some denial of individuals who seek service. And that could be for a variety of reasons, not just bed space. It could be medical. It could be other issues about the individual that they don't qualify for the program. But generally, lack of bed space when they're at 71% occupancy should not be a problem, right? So their goal is 80. They're at 71 last month. So there should be available beds. The challenge with individuals, number one, is the message, is that the folks who need it know it's there, right? So that requires crisis intervention, being aware of the facility. That requires folks in the jail being aware of it, folks in the emergency room being aware of it. It also means that the person's willing to go. So this is a voluntary program. You could show up at the emergency room with some type of issue that makes you eligible for the program, but you refuse it. So there's a lot of variables there. Could there be a better connection of all the resources and all the folks who are working in this? Yes. We've had the meetings. We've met with New Bern PD year after year. And for some reason, it's just not, I don't know if it's distance, it's time, what it is.
Yeah, I was just trying to get my mind around what's changed. In other words, is it a change there or is it a change here?
So they're on their 4th leader of the facility since we've been a member.
Right.
Every time you lose the corporate knowledge and you build the relationships within the community of the director of the facility, we have to recreate that. Commissioner Smith and I did that last week because it was the first time I'd met the new director. And I go back to the original. She was there about a year and a half. By the time she departed, we were really getting close to that 20%. She leaves and we go back to the 8 to 10 and then we build it back up. So it's kind of cyclical in a way. And then you got to remember, folks in the ED and folks in the jail and folks in the crisis intervention, they change out too. So it's a constant education process about what the resources are.
Having our new department,
Yes,
I would hope would improve that.
absolutely. And they are engaged with these folks and working with them. And to be honest, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have them come give a presentation here.
Commissioner Smith, you had a question?
No, I
I
did
saw
not.
you.
I was just looking and listening. And one of the answers to, I think, Mr. Butcher's question is they have to take people as they come. So although we are entitled, we pay, but if someone comes first and they've not paid, they're not from a county that's part of this, they have to take them.
Yeah.
So we could be a minute behind a person that's from,
Lenore,
right, well, not even Lenore is involved, but we may be one person behind someone from Wilmington or someplace like that. And although they are not a paying customer, I'm using that because they don't have a better terminology, but although they are not paying, they can't turn them away.
understand.
They have to take people as they come.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Howard?
I just had a question, Jack.
Sure.
Are there a lot of participants that are not paying? And essentially, our taxpayers are paying for those folks to participate.
So, that's a great question. There are lots of folks, if you look at the list, that come from all over the United States, this facility. Someone could be in crisis while they're visiting a beach and they show up at the Dix Center. So their home county is going to be Kalamazoo, Michigan, right? Just, that's the way it works. So you can't predict those things. Are there $1 trillion in the catchment area that go into the facility that support offsetting those other counties? Yes. So I don't believe we're supporting, say, a Lenore County resident, but, generally their statement, if these monies were to go away, we don't know if we could survive, so that makes me feel like we are. So it's hard to pinpoint that question.
Second question, have you seen any resistance based on location? Like, we have somebody who has an issue, and it's 3 or 4 hours away. I'm not going to go Wilmington to.
100%. The closer the facility, the easier it is, and the more effective it is. Again, if you're out near where we're talking about the new library, it's a 20-minute drive. But if you're at the Beaufort County line going the other way,
Okay.
And one of the things that they do that I was a real selling point to me 6 or 7 years ago when we started this was that they provide transportation to and from. And Commissioner Smith reinforced that with them last week. But again, is someone willing to wait in crisis for that van and that driver to free up in Jacksonville to come get them and go back? That's the problem. When people are ready for help, you gotta be there to take it to them.
That's right.
All right, Commissioner Hunt?
That answered one of my questions about transportation. Were they providing any pickup services? So that's good to know. And how many, you said 4 leaders in our contract with them? How many years has that covered, that they've had 4?
Say your question again. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
How many years has Craven County had this contract with them?
We started this contract the year before Commissioner Mitchell and Commissioner Booker came on our board. So this would have been
3 years ago.
2017.
17.
So 2017 to 2024, roughly 6-7 years.
One of the other problems that you have is if a person comes into the hospital after 12 o'clock at night, that place is not providing a ride for them. So the hospital is keeping that person overnight until the next day. And that's where the cost comes into the hospital, which I cannot get the president of the hospital to understand that.
And then finally, yes, you mentioned maybe having someone from Dix come to do a presentation like so many of our other people that we collaborate with do. That would be good for my benefit. Thank you.
And interesting fact, the director of the Dix Center is actually a Craven County resident.
Right.
So she commutes every day. Commissioner Smith and I talked to her about that, so.
I would just say that the same concerns that's been addressed here this morning, this is not the first time. I mean, even I believe after the first year that we started this, during budget time, we had discussions of, is this the best utilization of taxpayer funds? And at the time, we didn't have no other alternative. As has been already stated today, we do have the Hope Center now.
Yep.
And, what they're able to fulfill as far as our numbers, we'll have to discuss, or if there are other facilities. But this is not a new conversation. But I think it's getting to a point that, serious consideration is going to have to be given, is going back to statements already been said, is this best utilization?
One more question. Now that we have opioid funds, can we use those funds instead of taxpayer dollars to fund this?
You can, Vice Chairman Booker, you absolutely can. It does qualify. I will refer back to the board's guidance on opioid funds was not to supplant existing dollars that were being spent. So that's why we've not recommended that. Not supplanting that's an internal policy.
It would seem to be a logical use.
It really would. But again, my biggest concern here is they've got a formula problem. They got a problem on how this thing works. Because if another county beside us can get the same thing that we get and not have to pay the 300, there's something wrong. So I'm encouraging them, and Commissioner Smith was encouraging them to go back and look at their funding model. And I think there's other opportunities, and there are others in that board for different funding sources that can take care of what we're doing. You just got to be aggressive in how you go about them.
Yeah, I think the first director we had was a real good director and stayed on top of everything, which we haven't had for the last couple of years.
All right,
Okay.
anything else on that? All right.
So let me just move through, and I'm not going to steal thunder, but I had a really great visit to RCS last week. Saw the great things those folks are doing there. Mr. Hodges, Mr. Bennett, and I were out last Friday at the new DSS building site. Things are going very well. Ground is clear. Stormwater ponds being redone, and they should, in the next month or so, be beginning to dig pylons and do the things we need to do. There have been some parking challenges as we expected. We're working through those. We've had to make some accommodations to certain elements of that operation there, but overall, we're excited. And I think if Mr. Merritt or Mr. Harrelson was still here, they'd tell you it's desperately needed as we're seeing our patient counts and folks still continue to grow. And then lastly, and again, I hope this isn't lengthy, and I'm sorry if it is, but I want to make the board aware, and I know you've all seen it, but just to put it on the record, that the North Carolina Rate Bureau has proposed an average 42% homeowners premium increase statewide that would begin over the summer. And the Rate Bureau represents insurance companies throughout the insurance industry, and they've notified the state insurance department of its rate filing request, and the department, as part of their statute and the policy they follow, they have announced a public comment period about the proposed rate increases that runs through February 2nd. They accept both written comments in the form of a letter or public comments at a forum, which I believe is in Raleigh next week. I have to check that. The filing's over 2,000 pages, and the course, if it was to be approved as is, it would go effect August 1st. A little bit of history for the board. In 2020, the Bureau sought a 24.5% increase, but after this Department of Insurance negotiated that, it settled at 7.9.
All right, County Manager and I have had some discussion about this. I think some of our adjoining counties are going to be sending letters on the behalf of their counties acknowledging their concern with this rate increase. This morning, I'd like to ask this board if this is something you would desire also, that we instruct staff to send a letter of our concern.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Any other additional language you need in the motion? Jack?
Just a clarity that you seek a letter to encourage the Department of Insurance to work to reduce the request to a more manageable amount.
Yeah.
Okay, correct. All right, any further discussion on the motion?
I would just add that I have it on my schedule to attend that open public meeting next Monday. I
Okay.
plan to be there.
All right. All right, any additional? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passed. Anything else, County
Mr.
Manager?
Chairman, thank you for the time this morning.
All right, Commissioners, I'm going to ask that we would entertain a 5-minute recess. We'll come back and have our next presentation. Commissioners, we'll come back to order. Next on our agenda is a presentation from Mr. Stacy Lee, the Chief Officer of Systems and Operations for Craven County School System. He has a presentation this morning on the Apple iPad lease resolution. Commissioners, I'm going to ask Mr. Lee is going to give some brief opening statements, comments, and then I'm going to ask if you will allow this morning the December 12th, 2023 Craven County Board of Education work session. This item was discussed about the Apple iPad lease. There was a lot of, not that Mr. Lee's not going to give the same details here, but it was a conversation between their board members and staff, more than just Mr. Lee. I think it's very informative. If you will, it's going to it's a few minutes, but if you would allow this morning, after Mr. Lee's comments, I'd like to ask staff if they would to play that for us, to be able to hear that conversation in helping us this morning for questions that we may have. Is there any objection to that? All right, hear no objection. Mr. Lee, good morning.
All right, thank you, and good morning, and thank you for having me here today. I'm here today seeking approval for our next Apple lease, and it's really hard for me to believe, but this is, but through the graciousness and support of this board, this is the third refresh that we've gone through in our 8th year of students having state-of-the-art devices to support their education. So with that, on behalf of the Board of Education, staff, families, and especially our students, we are truly appreciative, and thank you for the support in this great endeavor.
Thank you, sir. We're going to listen to this, then we'll invite you to come back and, and answer a few questions, all right?
We turn the lights down then.
Current Apple lease, the last payment was made in October 2023. So this will be next lease for 4 years, it will take us to 2027. A few things to note on the new lease is we did, it's more this time, it's going from approximately paying $890,000 to $1.1 billion. The reason for the increase is the instruction team has identified a need for teachers to receive new iPads. So there's an increase on the device side, which is driving those expenses. Pretty much less than we experienced under what we did previously. One thing that we did add this time was the 4th year of Apple Care.
But just if I may stop us just a minute. Mr. Lee's making the presentation right now, but the questions will come from the Board of Education in a minute. And that's kind of where I want us to hear it.
There was more repair needs in that last year. So we went ahead and added Apple Care for the entirety of the years. And that was very small. The difference in the devices for it is a 32, we're going with a 32 gig memory device with 64. That's our baseline now, which is good news. We struggled a little bit with storage in the 32 gig devices, and this should address that. So those are the main things about the lease. The first payment will be due September 2024, and you have all the supporting documents and assembly. We've been working with Harrington Smith on the documents for review. They have been agreed to both National Financial and Harrington Smith, so we're in place with that. And also was mentioned that this was the mechanism for purchasing the state contract 2014. That was the mechanism that was used for purchasing the devices.
Okay. Did you say new iPads for teachers?
New iPads.
Okay. So do they already have iPads, or do they have laptops?
They have laptops, so they'll keep their laptops.
Okay.
This is a device that Ms. Lee or somebody can maybe help me with the instructional value. The teachers need a device during instruction that mimics a student device.
Right.
And that's important.
So currently, we have some older generation iPads, especially in our lower grades.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our middle and high have not had iPads unless they wrote a grant for it or something like that. Our students have iPads. And so in order to mimic what they are doing and what they're seeing their children are doing, and to be able to instruct remotely and walk around the classroom at the same time and do that, it's very important that they have the same device in their hand that students have. That does not minimize, though, the need that they need a full laptop to be able to do much of their work as well.
So not every teacher will get one.
Yes, every teacher.
Every single teacher in our district will get one.
Yeah.
Okay. And are we getting rid of any of our old student iPads? Or are they all, some of them that are just?
We will. What we'll do at the end of the lease, we collect the old devices,
Mhm.
and we put those devices up for bid. And if you remember last time, what we used those proceeds for was to purchase the teacher devices on the network side.
Okay.
So when we get the devices back, we sell them and then use that money for something else.
Okay. 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 Thank you.
No, it's you. It's everybody. Oh, y'all better hold hands. I hate these iPads. High school students hate doing their work on iPads. I have a high school student that had to do her work on an iPad. Mr. Lee? No. Where did Kaylee keep her school-issued device? You know. She picked it up from New Bern High School and threw it in the back of her car. She didn't even charge it. And during remote learning, when some poor little kid didn't have a device, she left it at Brent Manning's church with them, and she didn't use it. We are not preparing children to be career and work ready on an iPad. Even in business and industry, we're not. They're not going to do their day-to-day work on an iPad. And as far as fiscal responsibility goes, we can buy 2 Chromebooks for the cost of 1 iPad. And we were supposed to be an Apple district. And we're going to do all of our repairs. And we're going to do all of this at technology. And it's going to be great. And everybody's going to walk around in the land of Apple, and everybody's going to be happy. But now we have Apple Care because our district is not doing any repairs on anything ourselves. We're coordinating expenses to be farmed out because we're not doing anything in-house anymore. And it's costing this district an exorbitant amount of money. And I've got all kinds of stuff, and kids don't have a mouse. In high school, Kaylee hates it. This is not what they're going to go to work on every day. High school kids hate it. And I have even asked high school kids from other districts, what do you guys use? They use laptops for their device. And I said, well, what if you had to use an iPad? And they're like, there's no way we could do our work on an iPad. So I challenge everybody at the district level, close your little MacBook over there and do everything that you do all day long on an iPad. Everybody up here. You too. And I'd like to see Miss Altman do all of her work every day on an iPad.
Mr. Manning and Ms. Daisy attended the Apple Institute with us, and as far as using it in business and industry, in Fortune 500 companies, how many do they say use Apple products?
All of them.
Thank you.
Okay, who else?
I would say this, and maybe also our teacher could speak to this. I think that at our elementary school level, iPads have become very handy for educational purposes. I think at middle school, they're effective in ways. I'd like to see us not rely so much on computers as what we've been doing, but I still think it has affectability. Some of the things that I heard at our last conference that me and Ms. Stacy and Manning and Mr. Ipock were at was that students were tired of iPads, students were tired of Chromebooks, students were tired of technology, period. But then at the same time, we're creating competitions. So it's kind of its own little district world. And so I think that the only time that we're hitting a bump in the road is at the high school level. And I think it's because in high school we begin to see different needs, different pathways. And so I think it's more we need to look at the hybrid solution at our high school level just because of the different areas and needs that students are going into. But I also see, because I do have a background in drafting and CAD and drawing, and I have my own 3D printer and things like that, I'm beginning to see a push for that stuff to also work on an iPad. So as of right now, the world struggles in that. And I would generally, being that I was taught on a regular computer how to do drafting and things, I still know the old shortcut keys to make things go a little faster, but most people don't do that anymore. But I can see more or less that we need to start looking at hybrid solutions to move forward. I do recognize that when I talk to students, they're tired of the old equipment because it has a hard time staying charged and all that kind of stuff. And so I don't think we need to technically delay on making decisions, because we do have to make decisions to keep things moving forward. But I think that from my history and background in IT, no matter whether it's an iPad or a Chromebook or whatever, once they get old, you're going to have problems. And more than likely, with a Chromebook, just from my recommendations of when I help people with computers and stuff, they're cheaper, but most of the time you replace them twice as fast because they just don't last. So you're going to end up paying the same amount, whether your lease is going to be shorter because you're going to have to replace it earlier, or your lease is going to be longer because they're designed to last longer. So I think that just kind of covers that.
Just to kind of follow up on that hybrid model, I think that's very important. So we absolutely have to make sure that the coursework that our students are taking, they have the device that is best suited for that course.
Mm-hmm.
So currently, we, at our high school level, is really what we're talking about. We have classes that, especially in our TTE department, that students are given a device to use during that class because they do need something different than the iPad. We can meet that need individually per class to make sure that we have a device. And that happened last year. Last semester, we had several students that were having some issues with the community college. And Mr. Preble, he immediately, we identified who those children were or students were, and he immediately assigned them a Windows device. So we have that, and we can add some to make them more hybrid model for kids that need it for a specific purpose moving forward. But that's kind of, so I do think it can be the best of both worlds if we move in that direction.
So I have one clarification. I think, Mr. Lee, you said that this was just for students in grades 6 through 12, plus the teacher devices. So what, in this scenario, and you have to remember, some of us have not been here the entire time we've been in Apple District. So, my immediate question when I saw this on the agenda was I didn't know the term of the lease we were discussing. Has it always been a 4-year lease term? Okay, and so is this our third 4-year lease?
The first lease would have been before me, so this is the second one that I've been involved with.
Okay, but you believe, I know, yes, Ms. Altman. Okay, but as it stands, we've basically been using these devices for 7 years.
They replace them every time they lease.
Okay, right, but we've had Apple products for 7 years in the district, correct? Okay, all right, and so, I know they have a huge sector of the educational market. I guess my question is, there has to be data on how these devices compare at different grade levels in terms of student success, engagement, those sorts of things. We're hearing lots of different things. I guess,
Right, we just had that study done too about how much time kids are spending on devices.
right. I think the board has a lot of different issues about, and questions about those sorts of issues, so that would perhaps be helpful. But I just want a little bit of perspective on that for those of us who haven't been here since the beginning. Okay, and so I guess my question is also then, what would happen with the elementary students and their devices?
They were purchased outright using extra funding, so we're in a good place for those for the next several years, but those would have to be addressed 2 or 3 years in.
What if they need repairs? What if they need repairs? Do they have Apple Care, or do we? Okay.
I think it's important to note that when we initially began, we were not doing that care. But as we have become a one-to-one device, we don't have it's not the fact that our people can't do some of the work. It's the fact of the matter is that we don't have enough people to be able to keep our devices up. I mean, 20 years ago, if kids' iPad or laptop or whatever, if it went down, they could go without it for a little bit of time. But students, that is their instructional technology now. They can't go without it, even more than about a day. They need it because student instruction is being delivered and collected through that model. And I know that people are concerned about the amount of time kids are on iPads. But if you go into our schools, our teachers are teaching, kids are I was in a classroom last week. They had manipulatives, they had math, they had paper and pencil, they were doing mathematics and the calculator. So even though it is used more now than it was 15 years ago, 10 years ago, teachers are still delivering strong, direct instruction, and kids are being engaged in ways outside of a device.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that was obvious from my time with Mr. Manning and many of you at Apple Institute. I think the engagement is obvious, the benefit of that you get from the device. I think the other thing I'm hearing, though, from board members, which I think everybody needs to also consider, is we certainly have students at some levels with certain interests for whom, and we've had student reps in our meeting, for whom the iPad is obviously inadequate. And I think it would be probably the strong will of the board that to the extent we have children, high school students in particular, who have particular academic dreams, those dreams ought not be squashed because they don't have access to a device that allows them to pursue engineering or whatever the case may be. So I think to the extent that they're not in a CTE course, and I've been in some of those courses where you walk in and everybody has, a different device on their desk that they're working on. I think we want to figure out a way to achieve those goals for our students. That's the other concern. And just for me personally, we didn't have access to the lease until today. So, so I was not really able to review that ahead of today.
Yeah, we apologize for that. We didn't get it back from Terry Smith till 11 p.m. So it's been more than
Ms. Muse.
So to respond to the Fortune 500 company, comment, Dr. Miller? Where's the proof? That just means that everybody has at least one Apple device, whether it be an iPhone or an iPad. But that doesn't mean that Fortune 500 companies, all day, every person that works in that building is working on an Apple device. That just means everybody has some sort of Apple device.
I agree with that.
Because it's right here in this article.
And I was going to say to the chair, I don't want us to get away from thinking that any of these are any more than a tool for instruction. The best thing in the classroom is a great teacher. And we're giving them the resources and the tools they need to instruct. We're not putting this in the hands of students to replace our teachers. That is critical for us to understand, just like in a math class we would need a calculator, but in an English class we would need a different tool. So I totally agree with the conversation we're hearing. Different CTE courses, drafting, we will need different tools, and we certainly want to provide that for our students. So whatever tools they need to be successful, whether it is a mouse, whether it is a keyboard to go with their iPad. The issue becomes what we can provide them within the budget that we're constricted to, and being able to repair and replenish those so that no student goes without devices. So it is constantly a challenge when the district moves in that direction. It's hard to have one group doing one thing and being an expert on that, another group. So I totally agree. We need to ensure that whatever device or tool that a student needs, we provide that, whether it be a laptop, whether it be a calculator, whether it be a protractor, or whatever they need to be successful. We need to ensure we're providing that for all our students.
Right, and as this board knows, we're providing equipment in the form of computers for school resource officers when that's necessary, because we are able to purchase those at our educational rate. And so I just think we need to ensure that we're doing the same thing to the extent we need to with regard to our students. Okay, so Ms. Muse.
Since we didn't have these documents to review because they got here so late last night, I think we need to table this for right now and have a little more discussion on it before we, so I make a motion that we table it for right now and possibly come back to it in January.
Okay, motion.
Commissioners wanted to talk about this on Monday night. This Monday.
I mean, part of the lease process is the board of commissioners have to approve a resolution because they're the funding body for this. So they have to approve the resolution to say they're going to commit the funds for us to use, and that was planned for Monday, so that would have to be delayed.
Can't help that. We didn't get the paperwork until midnight last night, and then we had to all be here today.
Just make you aware of that.
I mean, this is money that is coming out of next year's budget, correct? So it's next year's capital budget, so there's no huge time constraint that requires this to happen, unless...
The ordering of it, making sure that equipment is here in time.
I don't think 30 days is going to kill us.
I feel like that'll be fine. On the board to feel comfortable with what they're doing.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All right, any further discussion?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
I agree with Mrs. Muse about, obviously, because I second the motion, but Mrs. Muse has been raising concerns about us using iPads for at least 4 years, and we've not done much about it. I'm an advocate of technology, but I think that clearly we can have other devices than Apple. So my vote, if we voted today, would be no.
Okay, with that, any further discussion? If not, then signify yes with the raising of your right hand. Motion to table, yes. All right, we'll table until January. Thank you.
Okay, that's...
All right, well, we'll move to...
the end of it. Several things, Mr. Lee, I know the board has a number of questions, and I wrote down several things through that conversation. Some of it was hard to hear.
Yes, sir.
And so, you know, commissioners, as I ask these questions, if they were thoughts that you had, please expound on them. We give you the opportunity. First, I want to make mention that in the statement that you made there towards the end, Tharrington Smith, I reckon they were the ones that looked over this lease, correct?
They did, yes, sir.
Okay, and you said there during those comments that you had received the lease from them on December the 11th, the day before that meeting? That meeting was on December 12th.
That's correct.
So you said you received it on December the 11th.
Correct.
So it was presented to, the information, the lease was presented to the Board of Education the next day. But you didn't get it until the night before, but you presented it to them then.
Correct.
You also made the board aware as they were discussing about whether to take action or to table it. You made them aware that this Board of Commissioners had to approve it also because we were the ones who were funding it through taxpayer dollars. And that it was supposed to be put on our agenda. The county manager had discussions with me about it at our first meeting in January. So that's what you stated.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I want this board to recognize that he made them aware of that. the statement was made that because they had just received it, what did 30 days matter? So they wanted a little more time to consider it, and that's their right. Any questions up to point? Yes, sir.
I'll wait till you're done.
Okay, all right. The next statement, I just want to, the questions that were asked. So the devices that we're talking about here are the devices for grades 6 through 12.
Yes, sir.
The devices for K through 5th were paid for by
ESSER funding.
ESSER funding.
Correct.
So that was no local funds that were contributed. And so does K through 5th, do they have Apple Care contract with them too?
They do, yes, sir.
Okay. So now what we're talking about here today before us commissioners is grades 6 through 12.
And the teacher devices.
And teachers' devices. That's a good point. Glad you brought that up. So presently, the teachers in grades 6 through 12 do not have iPads. Is that
Some
correct?
of them don't, some of them do. Some, the schools made local decisions to go ahead and purchase for their teachers, some did not. K-5, for the most part, through grants and other funding mechanisms, have provided their teachers' devices, but they're all very aged. Whoever has them, they're older devices, and they're 4 or 5 generations out from what the students have. So we thought it was good timing to go ahead and upgrade all the teacher devices as part of this lease. And that's the reason for the increase in the lease amount. There's a little bit of difference in some of the actually the pricing has gone down. But when you see the lease increase, it's because we're deciding to outfit the teachers with new devices this round.
Okay, any questions at this point, commissioners?
Yeah, I would like to know why we have to go from 32 gigabytes to 64 gigabytes.
That's the baseline, Commissioner Mark. The 32 gig is not offered anymore. Apple has upgraded it to 64 gig. And the reason that they did that, some of the applications that are sort of inherent to the device now are becoming very large, and we were having memory issues. Not we, Apple products, the iPad as a whole, were having memory issues, so they decided to go to 64 gig. That's their baseline now. You can get more, but you have to pay addition for that.
Yeah, the other point is, and it happened with the grant and it's happened with this, is we're asked to make a decision in a short period of time. The Board of Education has had many months to make a decision. And it would seem to me that they should have been bringing us into the decision with them so that we knew what the heck the whole thing was about.
All right, additional questions at this point?
Questions,
Yeah.
but I'm going to wait till you're done.
Well, no, please go forward.
Well, one of my questions is, so the old devices, you'll be selling those, correct?
Yes, sir.
And recouping some money. Will that come back to the taxpayers in the county once those are sold?
It comes back to the school district, and then we use those funds to fund other devices. So the last time that we collected the 612 devices, we used those proceeds to fund the MacBooks, the upgrade to the MacBooks that the teachers received.
So like for the hybrid for the high school and the teachers' MacBooks, that's what that money's going for? Okay.
Yes, sir.
That was my question. My other question is, as we get new iPads, and a concern that I have as a parent and other parents have is, if I call you or Central Services and I say, what sites or what apps has my child been using at home, can you guys go and securely and print out a report and put that into PDF form and email that to that parent? Because in the past, talking to some of your media coordinators and tech people, there's been some issues with that, like parents getting the exact feedback not quickly, or people on site at some of the schools being able to tell parents where their kids have been.
Mm-hmm.
As part of this, I would like that to be something that's assured to parents, that they can get that feedback with these new devices coming out, that I can go into securely print out a PDF report and say your kid has been on these 30 or 40 sites at your home or at school or wherever.
Commissioner Howard, we can. It's a little bit of work, and our technology group typically has to do that. Without getting too technical, we have a filtering solution to where students can't get anything bad. Now, students are very smart, and sometimes you get around filtering solutions, but we'll just leave that. So what we would have to do is make that request of our technology department. They really, at a school level, cannot perform that function, but we will be able to do it through our technology group.
I do think it would be beneficial for that to happen at the school level, because I've just, as I've been communicating with media coordinators, tech folks on the ground, on the front lines, parents have brought a lot of concerns forward. And I know when we're doing securely at historically, I've been able to go into, and, Jason called me up and I could print out a 2-week report, print it off probably within 5 minutes,
Right.
hand it to that parent during a parent-teacher conference, and that parent knows exactly where their kid has been. And to me, that's essential for a lot of parents as we introduce and we push more technology into the classroom, which I'm certainly in favor of. But I'm also in favor of, some accountability to parents.
Absolutely. We'll take a look at that. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So if I can interject, one of the questions I had, and it was hinted on, and you spoke about it. So we're including Apple Care in this contract that you presented before us. The statement was made that the number of IT folks had decreased in the school system. How many do you have employees? Do you know about?
I'd have to think about it, Commissioner Jones. It's about 12 to 14 in the group total.
Okay.
And I mean, just to comment around repair, having worked in 3 previous school districts, I don't know, and I'm sure there are some, but there's very few school districts that employ repair in-house anymore, because we get Apple Care for $79 for the 4 years on the device, and to try to provide that level of support internally, I haven't done a cost analysis, but I would be very surprised if you prove out hiring people to take on that burden would be cheaper than using Apple Care. And another part of repair, with older devices, there was actually, this is going to sound strange, there was actually something to repair internally that we could do. We could replace boards, keyboards, things like that. With iPads, there's very little that can be repaired. We have cracked screens and stuff like that, but most of the time it has to be sent off because we're not technically able to solve those issues.
And I'll support what he's saying. If you have a Chromebook, if there's a mouse pad issue or something, opening that Chromebook up, reconnecting that to the motherboard, stuff like that's very easy. But for an Apple device, it's a lot more technical, and it's not made to do that really.
They
So
probably throw them away and provide a new one.
They send us new ones, yes, sir.
So you made a comment, just for the record, $79 per device is part of the Apple Care
For
per
4
year.
years.
For 4 years. Oh, that's for a whole year.
That's for all 4 years.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but I find that Apple Care, I can get on my Macintosh, and I can spend 4 hours they'll work with me for 4 hours to do it.
Yes, sir.
And I don't understand why we have that problem if we can do that.
That's what Apple Care takes care of.
Yeah, right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions at this point?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
What we're talking about. You said that the teacher devices were 3 generations out.
Many generations. Some of them are even older than that. So
How old are the students' iPads that you?
this is the 4th year. So they're in their 4th year of student devices.
That's it? The kids?
They're 4 years old. This year, this is their 4th year. And I think the first lease, I wasn't here for the first lease, it was 3 years. And there's advantages to it. We found that last year we could actually extend it out to that last year, but what we did find was we had 3 years of Apple Care and the last year was uncovered. This lease, we're doing 4 full years of Apple Care, because when you get into that last year, that's when things start going downhill a little bit. So we decided to go ahead and spend that extra money for that 4th year of coverage, so they're covered through the entire lease.
All right, Commissioner Howard.
just for price points, what's the individual cost per iPad?
I've got that. And when you look at the lease, it's a little bit hard to determine because there's a lot of things built into the lease. The iPad is $294 for the device. The case is $99.95. And the Apple Care for 4-year Apple Care is $79.
Just to compare, because when we were listening to that, it said these cost 2 or 3 times more than a Chromebook. Chromebooks, we spend about $400 per Dell Chromebook in Carteret County, so it's not, the cost is pretty comparable.
It is comparable.
Great point. I'm nearing the end of things that I took off from the conversation. So since we've talked about Chromebooks, you know, since the very beginning of this process, I remember sitting on this board and there was a discussion between Chromebooks and Apple iPads. The statement has been made, and you may be able to answer this, Commissioner Howard, but, you know, you just gave us the pricing, so that's great to know. That's been put out in the forefront. So, you know, it's very comparable in price. A Chromebook, how long does it last versus an iPad? Did y'all do any research on that in your discussions?
I would think it would be comparable. It may actually be a little bit less. We found the iPad to be a little bit more robust than the Chromebooks that we had in district, so it would be close, Commissioner.
You want to comment on that?
I would agree. I think when you get to the 3-year mark with Chromebooks, you start ending up with some of the battery issues and stuff like that. You can push it into the 4th year, but the 4th year is a lot of repairs. You're opening those Chromebooks up quite often, and you need more people in district, so you'd have to hire more tech folks to help maintain those on the 4th year. So you can't. I think they can last 4 years and still be usable, but I feel like you have more in-house repairs. And with the $79 deal that you guys have with Apple, I think that's really good for Apple Care for 4 years. So, and you don't have to deal with it.
Okay, one last question, and then we'll definitely open it up. They talk about the hybrid model, and you know, it was stated at the CET classes and maybe others, or that they can't use the iPad. So, I think Commissioner Howard made mention about it, of the funds that you're getting from those devices that come back. Just for clarification and to understand, are y'all going to be purchasing additional Chromebooks, whatever they need for those other classes, so they're taken care of also?
We do, and we do that now. We have about 291 Windows devices deployed now to students. That includes some of our early college students. That includes some of these CTE. That does not include CTE. That's a standalone, excuse me. So when the need arises, we look at the individual need, and if there's another device that's needed for that student, for whatever reason, then we make that happen. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Great information. All right. Additional questions?
There's 3 conditions that are important to me. One, if we approve this, I want feedback on the implementation process. Last time around, I got a lot of feedback from media coordinators, and I know you were not in charge of this, Mr. Lee, at the time, I don't believe. This would go back to the first time these were brought, of some of these sitting on shelves for 4, 6, 8, 10 months and not out to the kids, and you're paying for that lease. I mean, taxpayers are paying for that lease for those Chromebooks, for those iPads to sit on shelves. I would just like to, feedback, meaning you guys come back to us and say, hey, we're 75% in the classroom, in kids' hands. We're 80%, we're 100%. I would like to know when these iPads get to the hands of those students. Secondly, I mean, to me, it's a contingency. Parents have access to where their kids are going, and I'd like to see that at the school level, where they can go to their media coordinator, their teacher, and someone can go on to something like Securely and print out a PDF report for those parents. Because, I mean, it's, ultimately the parent's responsibility. Where are these kids going? So those are two big sticking points. The other one, I guess the third one would be the $235,000 for PD. And I'm supportive of teachers getting PD. I saw that up there. If you're going to use these well, that education is important. But I'd like to see what some of that is, to make sure that money is reaching the classroom and the teachers are getting the training they need in a way that is positive, if that makes sense. Those are the 3 things that are important to me. When passing that to you, Chairman.
Good point.
Well, I'm going back now to the original one that we purchased. And I don't know if it was every school, but I went to a school, individually handed out that computer to a teacher. And I said, it's going to be your job to learn this. You'll get help from your principal or whoever in Apple Care. And then you've got to teach it to your students. That really never happened in all the schools that got these computers. And that was a big problem.
Part of the problem is the kids learn faster than the teachers sometimes.
Well, that can be true. That's not the point, though.
Yeah.
We got Commissioner Mitchell, and then we'll go to Commissioner Hunt. Commissioner Mitchell.
With it, a comment and a question. Okay, first question, if there are students or teachers who have been issued these devices and are not using them,
That's right.
okay, do they go back to the school? I guess what I'm trying to say is if someone is given this iPad, if a sophomore is, and they toss it in the back of the vehicle and don't use it, that is truthfully a waste of taxpayer dollars. Is that being monitored, and does the device go back to school?
Usage is being monitored, so we would have some trackability on who's not doing what. And then, Commissioner Mitchell, probably what we would do is intervene at the administration level to figure out, to Mr. Mark's comment, why that's not happening. I mean, the expectation is to be fully used to instructional value, whatever that instructional value is for the.
Well, I guess I want to hear something more reassuring than probable. If it's driving around in the back of the car and not being used, either start using it or give it back to the school.
I can assure you.
Whoever.
I can assure you if there's no usage at all, then those devices would be accounted for.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
and so that was my question, and thank you. My comment is if the device does not meet the student's classroom needs, then I am encouraged by the fact that the school will provide a device that will.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I think the technology should meet the need. As I don't have a parent, I don't have a kid in school, but I have a 31-year-old. So I have just been through high school and college. If a student does not prefer to use a school-issued device, I don't think that is the public's problem, okay, with it, because I think these are to meet needs, not wants, and those are two different things.
Agree. And just expanding a little bit on the need, some of those are really high-end computing needs.
Right.
Drafting was mentioned.
Yes.
Engineering type of applications. Sometimes, and that would be true of an iPad or a Chromebook or any lower-level computing device, you wouldn't meet those needs. But for most instances, the iPad fully meets the instructional need of our students.
Right, I guess what I'm trying to say nicely is I don't like it.
It
doesn't wash with me.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Commissioner Hunt.
Okay, so this is a lot to unpack. The Board of Education has had a big job just making this decision because of the changing landscape of information technology and how, you know, we're probably going to have to revisit this every time this contract comes up, to be sure, just because of that. My big concern is jumping from $889,000 a year up to $1.1 million a year. And I understand that there's some general statutes, North Carolina general statutes, that kind of give us direction on this. So I would like to ask the county attorney if in the general statutes, does it say that we have to fund the entire amount requested by the Board of Education?
I would have to review those very specific statutes. But my understanding is this is a discretionary decision of this board. At the end of the day, you can choose to fund it or not fund it.
Or half and half.
That certainly is an option.
So generally, there's a legal side of that, and then there's the practical side, which is if you reduce the funding to a school system, there's still the ability for a school system to sue counties based on the cumulative amount you give. If you reduce that, and I'm sorry Mr. Lee's in the room for this, we've never been in this situation, but ultimately, your decision-making authority is a baseline of what you gave them last year, or the year we're in now.
Yeah, well, you know, that's always come back, that is, they can sue us. Well, we could sue them because they haven't given our children education. Why don't we sue them?
Prerogative of the board.
Can I comment on that, if it's okay?
If you want to get into it.
Well,
I wouldn't, but. Step on in, brother. Come on.
I'm not suing anybody, so anyway, my days are short, so I'm not suing anybody, trust me. What we would anticipate, Commissioner Hunt, is during our capital request, we would probably balance out the request. And without getting into a lot of details, there's two sides to the capital request. There's the device lease piece, and then there's the everyday capital piece. We would, as a board, when we're setting our budget request to the commissioners, we would take that into consideration. So we know if we're increasing this side of the fence, $216,000, we would fully expect to try to balance that on the other side of the equation. Now, we may not be able to balance the full 216, but we would look at lessening that side so the total request stays consistent. Did I say that, Jack, okay?
You did, and I'll go further to close your ears. That's why we're in the room, even though you can go back and watch the video. But we're talking about an organization that has this multi-10 million plus fund balance.
That's right.
My philosophy isn't about this issue. It isn't changed over the years. Is if they have the ability to make up a difference with money that we've already given them that went unspent, they ought to use that first. And when that is down to a reasonable amount that the county and the the county commissioners, the Board of Education agrees on, then we'll talk about more money. We're still at a point where that fund balance grows year after year. Excuse me, Mr. Lee, for this statement. Grows year after year, and we agree on an amount, and it goes the other way versus going down.
Yeah, there's one other thing. They have the opportunity of getting information from Apple, and they probably had somebody in from Apple. But now we're being asked to come up with some money. Why don't we have the same chance of having somebody come in from Apple who is familiar with this and who has used this in other classrooms, and let them tell us a little bit about it?
Well, that's certainly the request this board can give the Board of Education if you desire to do that. But the ability, let me just be clear, the iPads that are in the kids' hands now are paid for the year in the existing budget. You're talking about a funding decision that you're going to deal with in May and June for next fiscal year. Whether or not you decide to pay the difference, and I understand the school system may be even willing to cover it this year, and there's some discussion about future years, but that's your decision.
Yeah, it's
That's new money. That's not old money. So I take back to Commissioner Hunt's question. When they're asking for new money, everything's on the table. Can they still sue you? Sure. But you're not reducing. You're just not giving them an enhancement.
Okay, Commissioner Hunt?
Yes, so that's a major concern of mine, the cost, the dollar amount. When at the 11th hour, we don't have time to research and ask questions while we're buying more devices than when our student population is decreasing and our teacher population is decreasing, but yet we're buying nearly 1,000 more devices than we did on the last contract. I understand some of them, a lot of them are being replaced, but that's 1,000 more devices. We're also adding in Logitech crayons. I think that's a nicety. And I don't want to get into all that weeds. I just have humongous concern about jumping from $899,000 a year to $1.1 million.
And Commissioner Hunt, if I could, the extra devices are for the teachers. The last lease did not have devices for teachers. So the extra 1,000 devices that you're referencing are for the teachers in this lease.
Just the teachers, not the
The
students?
extra devices.
The extra devices.
So how old are the teachers? What are the teachers working with? I'm surprised that they're
Very, very old iPads.
wow, okay.
Yes.
So I mean, so the
I mean, we
students have devices that the teachers,
correct. In some cases, they do. Yes, sir.
So you are replacing the 6 through 12 student iPads and, for the first time, buying the teachers.
That's correct. Yes,
matching
ma'am.
iPad.
Yes, ma'am. And that's the reason for the increase.
Right, so that's the additional, or part of the additional 200,000.
That's correct.
Clarification on that. It's teachers from K to 12, not just 6 to 12.
It's K to 12.
K to
It's all teachers.
Okay.
Yes.
All teachers.
But I thought we, originally, in the original contract, we bought them for the teachers.
At a lower grade.
I don't know about iPads.
I know it because I handed them out to the teachers. I went to the school and I handed each teacher
Even so, they're old.
a computer and said, it's your job to learn how to do this, and you'll get help in learning how to do it, and then you have to teach the
Right.
students.
So those, if those were, Commissioner Martin, then those would be the devices that we're replacing because they're very old.
so, and I think those were MacBooks, because when
They
the
were
original
Mac.
plan came
They
through,
were MacBooks.
we did not get iPads.
All right, Commissioner Smith, you have anything?
No, I was about to say that they did give teachers in the lower grades, I know, because I, like Mr. Mark, personally went to the school when they had the handout. Yes.
Yeah, that, good point. I think it was MacBooks. That
Yeah.
is-
Yeah, it was MacBook.
Okay.
And
Were you
Commissioner-
finished, Commissioner Hunt?
Yes, sir.
With my questions.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Smith, did you have any additional questions?
I don't have.
Okay. We hadn't got to you, Vice Chair. Do you have any?
I only have one question. It has nothing to do with anything that's been said. My question is, what happens when a kid loses an iPad?
They pay for it.
They pay for it.
Yes, sir.
So we make them the parent write a check for $500 or whatever,
Yes, sir.
and we actually collect it.
We try our best. Yes, sir.
That's what I'm-
Well, it follows you to graduation,
It
correct?
does.
You don't-
It's a fee at graduation.
That's what really that usually pushes them to pay it is they don't have any, I mean, there's not a lot you can do, but when you get to graduation, you don't walk unless you pay those fees.
Yeah, they couldn't do the work.
Could be a long time until they graduate.
Could be the only time they get the money, but they get it.
Additional questions? All right. Did you have any additional questions? No. All right. Last thing I'd like to get you to address to us, and then we will, the board can have discussion amongst ourselves. You're asking today for a decision by this Board of Commissioners. You relayed to me just prior to, during our recess, that the Board of Education just approved the Apple lease on their part. Unanimously. Okay, so
Unanimously.
they have approved that on their part. So we're the second step in this, since we're the funding of taxpayer dollars towards it. Why is today of essence that we vote on this? That's what we need to understand from you. Because it is, and I will say this just so our citizens understand, most of the time when we spend an amount of money like this, it is something that we usually is presented to us, and we take time in making a decision. And so it's sprung on us a little bit here, to make a decision today. But we need to understand, and I think the taxpayers need to understand, why does this Board of Commissioners, why is it of essence that we make a decision today?
And there's really two things to consider, and one gets to the implementation concern of Commissioner Howard, is even though Apple's improved their lead times on delivery, it's still a bit out. So you're looking at about 8 to 10 weeks delivery time in a good scenario. So what we wanted to do was be able to get the order placed to get those devices in, so by the end of this school year, or even the very, very beginning of the next school year, students had their new devices. And teachers could get the benefit as soon as the new devices were inventoried. The other part is the purchasing mechanism that we used was under state contract with Apple. The Apple state contract and DPI, they're in negotiations. That contract runs out the end of January. There's some anticipation that that contract will not be renewed because some of the requirements DPI is putting on Apple, and we do not know if Apple's going to accept those things. So we would like to be able to purchase under the state procurement contract that we currently have in place, because if we delay that, then we have the delaying of the purchasing process, which pushes the delivery of devices back and deployment back even farther for the students.
And possibility devices would be more expensive too.
Absolutely. In all ways, they could be more expensive. Yeah, we got the benefit of state pricing.
All right, okay. All right, back to the board. What's your discussion?
Well, that comes back to the Board of Education. Why did they take so long to get this to us?
Well, he said they didn't get it until December.
Well, yeah, but they could have gotten it before December.
I will state, just for the record, Vice Chair and myself and County Manager, as you know, we meet, we try to meet monthly. Mr. Lee's been a part of those meetings because he is over operations systems, and Superintendent, former Chairman and Vice Chairman. It was brought to us, you correct me if I'm wrong, was it October or November?
November.
November.
Several months ago.
So in November, they discussed it with us. We had a lot of questions for them in the room, and the former chairman and vice chair, they told us it was their plan to push this forward before the end of the year. There was a change in leadership. I'm not blaming nobody. That's not the point. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying. But because I have not talked to the current chair or vice chair, they have not reached out to me about this. But the former chair and vice chair have on multiple occasions. And it was their intention in what they told me, and it went before you in December. I think they had set that agenda, if I'm correct, of December the 12th for it to be voted on. So but it was a unanimous vote that it be.
Mr. Chairman, and just for point of clarity, you're exactly right. And we tentatively had a placeholder at our second December meeting. But the meeting we just watched, when they tabled it, there was no action for this board to take because it has to go through their board first, which happened, of course, today, just previously
It
before.
would have been a good idea if we all sat in on the board and we could have asked that board some questions.
Okay, additional.
I just have my conditions that if we move it forward with anything, I'd like a report back on the professional development for teachers since we're spending $235,000 for that, and that's, I think it's needed, but that could be a controversial statement. 2, the implementation. If we're going to approve this now and rush, partially because of implementation, I just want to report back next year saying, hey, we're at 75% of the way there. We're starting school and every kid has an iPad in their hand. So we've spent this taxpayer money and we know it's been spent well. And 3rd, the security for the parents. I know that's not necessarily free. Some of these places like Securely will charge the district money for that. But I would like to see a way where parents can go and access the history of on those iPads for their kids. I mean, I think that's a
great points. Clerk, you've included that, so, all right.
I do have
Commissioner
one
Smith.
question. When the iPads are handed out to students, before you give them to them, can they be made so that they can't go to certain sites?
Yes, ma'am, that's what our filtering solution does.
Okay.
That if you try to go to a bad site, it will not allow you.
Okay.
It blocks it before you even get to that site. And we can actually track the activity of kids trying to go to the bad sites.
But Ms. B is someone who looks at the reports. Kids constantly find ways around that.
They do. They're very bright.
I'm sure they do.
And parents want to know. And it could just be something that seems innocent. Kid at Grover, well, I'm not going to name the school, is communicating, a 13-year-old girl is communicating with a 22-year-old man using the iPad. It could be some kind of chat or whatever. This is a situation a librarian told me about. Now, it's been a few years, but now you have that's just something that's why I like the Securely. Those things are less likely to happen, even if they seem innocent.
Okay, commissioners, you feel like you've had enough information? All right, what's the desire of the board?
I move to approve $889,000 as previously funded for the Apple lease.
All right, you heard the motion. Is there a second?
I'm not going to second that, but I would recommend a modification.
All right, well, let me first, is there a second to the motion?
I'm sorry. Your motion was to approve
$889,000 of what we've done previously for this Apple lease.
Any second? Fails for a second. All right, what's Commissioner Mitchell, you had a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we fund the full amount as requested by the Board of Education.
With the caveats?
We have a motion to adopt the resolution that is before you. Now,
With the caveat, the 3.
with the caveat, we've had a second, but I do want to state for clarification and talk to the county manager about it. Appreciate the motion that was made, but really all that's got to be said in the motion is to adopt the resolution. The discussion on funding will happen during budget time, correct?
Correct.
So Commissioner, and it doesn't say that Commissioner Mitchell, I'm not trying to disagree with your motion. It doesn't say that we will not fund it.
Right.
It doesn't say that we won't. I mean, we're going to have those discussions at budget time.
I understand.
I'd like to ask you, would you consider
As modified.
modifying the motion is to adopt the resolution
As written.
for the Apple iPad lease, correct?
Well,
I may be wrong.
Mr. Chairman, no, you're right. But I am, as I've read it, as we're debating, the statement there says, whereas the contract will require the Craven County Board of Education to pay $4,422,194.18 over the 24, 25, 26, and 27 fiscal years, as reflected. Can I speak to the county attorney for a second?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, so there's a little discrepancy here, and there's a question for Mr. Lee that needs to be addressed, I think, before we can advise you. When is the first payment going to be made?
September 1st, 2024.
Okay, so you said that in that meeting.
Yeah.
So it'll be next fiscal year.
We're adopting the resolution.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, just for the record, I mean, you need to see under the now therefore be it resolved. I mean, there is some obligating yourself to this expense. Now, whether you actually appropriate it, that's up to this board in May and June.
So Commissioner Mitchell, you would make your motion to read, we adopting the resolution for the Apple iPad lease.
Correct.
Okay. Who seconded, Commissioner Smith?
Yes, I did.
With the caveats.
With the caveats, and
Yeah.
just to ask Jack a question, we can add those, our requirements here, right?
You can add anything you want as a stipulation, but most importantly, your stipulations work better in a funding scenario. But in this instance, I'm sure Mr. Lee will share your stipulations, and I feel almost 100% they will comply with those to provide you the information you need.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second, now discussion on the motion. Is there further discussion? I appreciate the discussion by the Board of our Board of Commissioners. You know, there's been a lot of concern up till today, not that we don't want to make sure that the students and teachers have these iPads, but, you know, just we're accountable for this money.
Absolutely.
And a lot of eyes are on us, and we definitely want to do the right thing. I just will state, you know, we look to Commissioner Howard as a teacher for his advice, in which we've gleaned from that today, and also from Commissioner Smith, who served on the Board of Education. I will also say, you know, talking with my wife, she works in the elementary schools, and I did ask her, you know, what she felt about the iPads, and her biggest concern was, at this point, if you make a change, here we are, you've stated it in January, she felt like it was impossible with her limited knowledge to, you know, make everybody come up to date on what to do by the next school year. You know, we're kind of, if there's a desire, and I reckon we would say this to the Board of Education, because it's not our decision what they choose, whereas Chromebooks or iPads, but, you know, if their desire is to make a change, this needs to be a process years in advance of a lease.
Not at the last
Not at the last minute. And that's one of the main reasons that I can support it and will support it. I don't think it's a choice. We've got to do this, because it would be a great disruption to the education of our students. And so that's my statement. Any more?
I'll just make a brief statement. I liked Commissioner Hunt's motion, but the teachers often get pushed to the back of the bus, and I just cannot see doing that. And I know that's not your point. You want to maintain funding as is for future references, so we're not stuck at a higher funding. So the logic is there, but I want to make sure we give the image that we're supporting our teachers, and they have at least technology that's at the same level as their student.
All right, any additional comments?
I would like to reply to that. I support teachers 100% as well, but I also acknowledge the fact that they have double digits, $13 million, that they could put towards some of that money towards this as well. That would be my point.
Okay, thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, if you will, please call the roll.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunt?
No.
Commissioner Mark?
No.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Bucher?
Yes.
Chairman Jones?
Yes. Ms. Lee, we thank you
Thank
for
you.
staying here this morning and for your
Thank you.
help.
Great conversation.
We look forward to future discussions and working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, Commissioners, Commissioner reports. Who'd like to begin today?
If you don't mind, because I got to
Yes.
Good. The Habitat for Humanity and the Rotary Clubs of New Bern are having a groundbreaking for a house that Rotary will be funding in the Pembroke area on Saturday the 20th. It's on Acock Avenue at 10 o'clock, and I certainly invite everyone to come and the public.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Howard?
We had a great town hall at Township 6. I'd like to thank Jack Veit for showing up, giving a good presentation about county government and how it works. A lot of positive feedbacks on that. Chad Strong was there as support too. Very thankful for that. And NCDOT came. Cadmus Capehart, correct? Came, and it's one thing to kind of, for citizens to go onto NCDOT and look at some of these changes themselves, and they don't really get what's happening. It's, unless you have an engineer background or something, some of the finite details they just don't understand them. So for them to get to come out and ask those questions to the engineer in charge of the bypass was very informative. And I think even Jack, after sitting through many of these, said he learned a couple of, at least it clarified some stuff for him. So if someone at that level of knowledge is still learning when you have the chief engineer coming out, I certainly learned quite a few things. So it was positive.
Commissioner Howard, I think you and I spoke that night. Of course, it's up to the board, but I think we wanted to invite DOT to give that same presentation at your next day meeting. It was a very thorough update from, I would say, the James City Bridge to the Carteret County line for all that projects. And I mean, I learned a lot that I didn't know, and the Commissioner Howard just said that, but if the board would like, we would try to get them here for your second February meeting.
Thank you. Anything else, sir?
That's it.
All right. You want to go next? Okay. Commissioner Mark, Commissioner Hunt?
I would just like to commend the Sheriff's Office and Hope Mission Recovery. Over the past year, I've met residents of our Craven County Jail that have been released on the EOMP program, where they went out and assisted with roadside cleanups and then moved on to Hope Mission Recovery to further their recovery process. And I attended a graduation recently in Carteret County, where our Craven County residents, along with 10 other residents, so 13 in total, graduated, completed the entire Hope Mission program. I'm very proud of all of them, and I'm proud of the Sheriff's Office and the efforts they're making to move forward on helping all of the citizens in Craven County.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Smith? Okay. All right, I don't have anything. Staff, you got anything to bring forward?
No, sir. It's just a reminder. I'll say it one more time. Tuesday, January 30th, 2024, 5 p.m. Topic: opioid settlement funds. Location: Riverfront Convention Center. Special call meeting of the board.
Okay. Hear nothing else of this Board of Commissioners. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I got a motion. I'll make the second. We all stand adjourned.